I'm Cody Gilkison, Chairman of the Board for Danville Pride. Welcome to our 2025 monthly educational video series, where we dive into important topics about the LGBTQ+ community and our shared experiences. At Danville Pride, we believe education is the key to building understanding and creating a more inclusive community. That's why we're bringing you this series, to highlight issues, share stories, and foster conversations that matter. Each month we'll cover a new topic, everything from LGBTQ+ history and allyship to mental health and intersectionality. And I'll be joined by a special guest in every episode to share their unique perspective and expertise. Our goal? To educate, empower, and embrace everyone in our community one conversation at a time. So whether you're a member of the LGBTQ+ community, an ally, or just curious to learn more, this series is for you. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to stay updated on new episodes. We can't wait to take this journey with you. Hey everybody, and welcome back to our education series. We finally have a guest. So this will be a different take than what you saw last week, but this is going to start the tradition, the way that the episodes will look going forward. And our very first guest, I'm so excited to have, is Mickensy Ellis-White. Welcome, Mickensy.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
It's so great to have you. Do you want to give folks a little bit of a background?
Sure. My name is Mickensy Ellis-White. I am a licensed clinical professional counselor. I'm located here in Danville. I'm born and raised from here. I also have a private practice called Mpower Counseling, where we specialize in trauma and addiction. And we're in the process of expanding our business into offering Medicaid services to the community at large.
Wow, that's huge. Yeah, it's a big undertaking. I'm really excited to see how your business is growing and you're stepping into your power here is so cool. Mickensy been a staple in advocacy in the Danville community for a while now, and I'm somebody that I look up to immensely. So I'm hoping that we can have a cool conversation. Our topic is more relevant than ever right now with the current political landscape and everything else going on. We're talking about mental health in our community, right? So tell me, what inspired you to pursue a career in mental health?
Great. Thank you for asking. I was a real bad kid.
Real same.
So, no, I would say the easy word to say is lots of trauma. And so as a teenager, I actually spent a little time in what we call the Pavilion over in Champaign. And it helped me in so many ways and really opened my eyes up to the importance of mental health and what it can do. And the long-lasting lifelong impacts that it can have on a person to have those resources available. And I really can't even ever see myself doing anything else.
Right. Have you always done your work through Mpower?
No. So I got my master's and I actually joined the military. So
Right.
I wanted to get my doctorate. And so I figured, hey, what's a way for a poor girl like me to get some money for school? So I joined the military, went to Iraq for a year in 2011, served as a behavioral health specialist overseas and into detainee camp operations. My claim to fame is I got to meet ISIS. We had like Saddam's brother and other high-level officials there. So that was my overseas experience. And then I came home from my deployment, and my ultimate goal was to always work for the VA. So I got home and started applying to the VA for different jobs, and I finally got hired as a psychology technician. In 2012, after the Phoenix scandal at the VA, the Office of Mental Health Operations came to Danville, and me being me, I spoke up and I was like, hey, I'm actually licensed and can perform this job at a higher level. And so I was actually the first licensed professional mental health counselor to be hired in Danville under that role. And so lots of things happened at the VA and I was ready to leave my position. I actually ended up leaving in 2020, right as the pandemic was starting. But I started my private practice part-time in 2018 outside of the VA. And then I switched over to a school during the pandemic. So that was interesting. And then I went full-time into my private practice in 2022. I've been working as a solo practitioner since then. And then last year we got a sizable grant to expand this business. So it's been quite the career trajectory, I would say.
That's amazing. What led you to that decision to start your own practice?
I always kind of knew that that's where I wanted to be, is like, I am an entrepreneur at heart, and I kind of say that I'm not the greatest employee. So I have several arguments in my own head about what I should be doing on a daily basis. So like, I argue with my boss regularly. So
Yeah, that's something, in my career, I've had to sort of find find my happy medium, because I'm in the same boat. I'm not I struggle with authority, I guess, but it is what it is.
that's why the military wasn't a really great fit.
I would never have survived basic. No way.
It was wild.
Yeah. So, how does your role in advocacy, because beyond all of this, you're also a major advocate for a number of our underrepresented communities, in particular the LGBTQ community. We've seen you participate in a lot of efforts that we've done. How does your role in advocacy and counseling sort of intersect to create positive change in our community?
Well, first I'll start with mental health as an aspect that, fortunately, one of the good things to come out of the pandemic was the focus on mental health. And so early in my career, there's been a lot of struggle with seeing mental health as important and recognizing licensed professionals to do the work that we do. So since the pandemic, I think it really highlighted the need for mental health and advocacy. And so I've been at the forefront of that. I am a Governor Pritzker appointee to the Veteran Suicide Program Advisory Council. And so for breakthrough therapies, I'm also certified in psychedelics. So I hope to advocate for those types of treatments and the importance of that for suicide, treatment-resistant depression, a number of other issues that the traditional medications and talk therapies aren't necessarily able to impact. So that's some of the work that I do with veterans. And certainly the LGBTQ has a higher rate and incidence of mental health conditions co-occurring. And so that's something I'm also very passionate about. And so there's a number of ways that I like to remain involved and be an advocate for in those areas.
That's fantastic. Tell me a little bit more about the crisis line.
The crisis line. So there is a crisis line. It's kind of like calling 911. Only it's calling 988. So it's easy to remember. It's short. Before it was like a long 1-800 number. People kind of use it, not use it. So this is a great tool that I recommend that all of my clients use. So when I first meet with them, I tell them, hey, this is not 24/7, practice. I'm not always going to be available. So this is a nice option that's staffed 24 hours a day by trained professionals that can be there for someone. And it's not just for people that are suicidal. Like, obviously, that's an important thing, that if you are feeling that way, it's a great tool. But it's just for anybody that's in emotional crisis, that they can reach out to a trained professional. And then I say to them, like, if that's something you do, please let me know and we'll follow up with our regularly scheduled appointment about what it is that's going on. But it's a nice in between to help people get their services and get the needs taken care of without having to go into the actual hospital, because that's not always the best way.
No, right.
Like, people don't typically feel better after they've done that.
Yeah. And this is when the 988 number came up, I was big about promoting it at my job as well, because it's one of those things where we always needed a resource like this, where if somebody's having a mental health crisis, if you call 911, the odds of you being arrested during a crisis are really, really high. So being able to dial 988 from anywhere that your phone can dial 911, which is anywhere really, is so vital and so important. And I know people who've used the crisis line to great effect on their lives, right? So it really is something that everybody should know. That's why I wanted to have you speak about that a little bit. So if anybody hasn't heard of that, just to reiterate the point and hammer it home, if you're having a mental health crisis and you need 24-hour support, you can dial 988 from anywhere and you can get that support, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful. So how has your journey as an ally of the LGBTQ plus community influenced your perspective on mental health?
I'll tell you, one of the highlights of my career, this just really sticks out to me, about one of the children I met with. He came to me and, it's funny because he would just like sit there and be quiet. And I really could not get out of him what was going on. And his mom was like super worried, and it took a lot of trust and a lot of rapport. And I finally got it. Is that he wanted to transition, and he was living, in a very rural community where there's not a lot of representation and I'm sure a lot of bullying. And he was so afraid to come out to his mom. And finally, he trusted me with that information. And I was able to work with his mom and be like, this is what's going on. This is how you can support him. And she was so wonderful. Like, she was like so supportive. She was just like, I think it was a large sense of relief that came over her of like, oh, that's it.
Yeah.
But it was really a transformational moment in my career that I hold dear to my heart, that I'm like, oh, what an honor that I get to be a part of that. Right. Like, I want to be there and to support people in their journey and whatever that journey looks like. But the struggle that was apparent in this person's life was just like written all over him, in his body language and his presentation and everything. And it was really just a matter of, I don't feel good in my body and I need some support. And so that's just one example of some of the opportunities I've had throughout my career, but that one stands out to me.
Yeah, it's, affirming care is so very important, especially now that, more than ever. I didn't think we'd ever get to a point where it's worse for trans folks in the mental health space, but it sort of is at this point. There are people that, because the issue has been politicized, they see the person who's actually suffering as a byproduct of a political issue and not a whole person, right? And we see that a lot. It's very tricky, and I always tell people, when you're seeking mental health help, it can be trickier if your parent is involved, but if you personally are seeking it, and the person sitting across from you that's giving you the counseling is not a good fit for you, is not a good cultural fit, it is not worth it to stick around and see if it gets better. It's time to take somebody else. We have options in this country. Sometimes you don't always have the financial availability to go out and look for another option, but getting treated by someone who believes that an aspect of your personality isn't real is not healthy, right?
Well, and let's just talk and be honest about the fact that mental health has oftentimes been weaponized against people, and especially in LGBTQIA plus population, with our dark history of conversion therapy. Like, I like to think of that as more of the faith-based community that was involved, but there were a few of us that used their credentials for the wrong purposes. And so psychedelics played a role in that as well. And so I just want to name that's a real concern that people have if they're aware of the history, and that in ways that this has been used and weaponized against them. And so I think it's important.
And I would point people to a couple of resources if you want to learn more about the struggles behind conversion therapy and why that's so dangerous, and see examples of it. There's a scripted movie called Boy Erased that's very, very good. And there's also a documentary. There are a few documentaries, but one that we really like is called Pray Away. Very good. Both available on Netflix. You can go check those out today if you want to learn more about the topic. But I'm someone who went through a similar situation, right? My mom discovered that I was gay when I was 15, and it was like a real watershed moment where it was like, I can't live like this. I would rather not. I would rather not be alive, right?
Yeah.
So we went to a counselor. First go at a counselor, my mom ever what meant the most to us in our lives was our faith. So we went to a Baptist counselor, and that really, really turned into something that at the time, I didn't know conversion therapy was a thing. At the time, right, I did. How was I supposed to know at 15 years old in 2000? So when I was not expecting for them to say, in order to fix this, we need to send you away somewhere else and sort of drill it out of you, and it's not going to be easy, but we can cure you. And that in and of itself is probably the first time that I recognized I'm not sick, right? And that saying no to that was not didn't seem like something that was possible for me to do, but I did it, right? Because I come from the deep South in a Baptist household. That's like parents say go. There's not an argument, right? So saying no to that was rough, but I'm glad I didn't. And that it actually years later, going back and researching, they were going to send me to Exodus International, which is among the biggest offenders. That thankfully was one of the first dominoes to fall when people started realizing that this was dangerous and harmful for kids. And Exodus, I mean, they were doing shock therapy. They were doing, conditioning with electrodes, with watching pornographic material and shocking someone if they were aroused. It was, I don't know what my life would have been like if I would have gone through that. Right. I know I struggle with mental illness now, and it would be so much worse if I had gone through that. Right.
Cody, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I didn't know that about you from before. So that's such an honor for me to hear your story. And wow.
It was a tricky part of my life. And to be honest with you, my relationship with my mother was irreparably damaged by her taking me to that and sticking by it. Right. And sometimes that's how we know if home is a safe space for us or not. Right. And home at that point was not really a safe space. So I spent as little time there as I could. Is what it is. But
that
this is
chills.
For those that are listening that don't know the damage that conversion therapy can do. I implore you, please. I've given you some resources here. We've told a little bit about my story. Please go educate yourself. If you have any inkling in your heart that says maybe this would work, please go listen to an expert before you continue to think that, right?
I do, and I don't have my facts in front of me, but I do want to name that I think the American Psychological Association and some of the other like reputable associations, one that I'm a part of, the American Counseling Association, which is affiliated with the APA, that they have come out and like strongly said that conversion therapy is not okay. We should not be practicing that as professionals. Do not go to someone that does that. And so I do want to name that. It's unfortunate that we have the history of that, but we need to be aware of that history and acknowledge that history. And then to your point, Cody, like be able to differentiate ourselves as that's not what we're doing. It's not okay to do that.
And then from my personal struggle, that led me to not seek out counseling that I desperately needed for my mental health after that experience, because I didn't know if somebody was going to surprise me and ship me off to who knows where to torture me. That's what this is, right? They're using words like shock therapy and blah, blah, blah. Those aren't harsh enough. This is torture, right? This is what they're doing to these people. So that's it. Yeah. Anyway, it took me a really, really long time to get on the path to where I could find real help for my mental health struggles that weren't rooted in the problem starts with you're gay, right?
But that's how I see myself as an ally, that, that is something that I strongly am adherent to, and that I want to be gender affirming. So, like I can't say I always get it right. Like, I'm not perfect, and I want to learn, and I'm not a part of the community in that way, but that I want to be here to support people who are, and to help them live their best life, and to have the best mental health. And that goes hand in hand, right? Like that's the goal, or it should be.
I'll just give a shout out here too, that I know that what we're talking about is a little bit difficult and it could get a little emotional to listen to, but I would implore you, stick it out to the end. It's worth it to listen. Sometimes educating yourself about our community can be really triggering and really can set you off. But I promise you'll be a more effective ally if you educate yourself. You can't stick your head in the sand, right?
I do want to say too, thanks to your organization and the friendships that I've developed, I have seen the community really grow in ways like in Danville. I remember the night that we were all at the one with the picture with the park bench that you guys put in the promo. Like, I was there, and I remember making the remark that, like, wow, look at how big our community is getting. This is so impressive. Like, people are coming out. It's so exciting.
It's something that brings me the most immense joy, is that we've been able to be that sort of lighthouse that's we've added to our promo image now. And, a lot of our group is made up of people who came from elsewhere to here to be safe, right? And we opened the doors and said, if you want to be safe, maybe come in. We got plenty of room in our arms. And I'm really happy that so many people have been able to call Danville home and look at it as an affirming space because of Danville Pride, and that thrills me to no end.
I agree.
So, what challenges have you faced in your mental health work and your advocacy as it relates to the LGBTQ plus community?
Well, this is that part about me being my own boss that I'm kind of so
who gonna check me, boo?
No, yeah. So that's kind of that part. So I personally have not encountered like a lot of pushback with that, but I kind of pride myself on that, doing it without being, out there doing the most, I don't know, like I can meet with people, I can see them privately, I can help them privately, I can help them feel safe, and so that they can go out and live their best lives. I don't need to be at the forefront of that in my own way. I don't know, it's hard to say, but what I'm trying to say is that, being my own boss, I kind of get to set the trajectory. And now that I am venturing into becoming an employer, I'm happy to put my money where my mouth is and hire people that are from diverse backgrounds as well. And so that's going to be a big part of the expansion, is like having representation in that way through the people that I'm hiring that are going to be going out and working within the community. So
that's brilliant. I love that. And listen, I talk about this all the time, and this will be the first time that I've talked about it on this show, but you're probably going to hear it till I'm blue in the face. But I believe wholeheartedly the gospel of the diversity thought proposition. And that if you look at what Mickensy doing and say, you DEI, wait a minute, let me explain. So when you hire people from diverse backgrounds, you all look at a problem from different angles. That diverse backgrounds doesn't mean people of a different race or people of a different gender or it means people who grew up differently than you did. Mm-hmm. Right? If you get a group of people who all come from the same background, when you show the long math of their work, it's going to be the same long math of their work. And as somebody building a team, if you have people from diverse backgrounds, they may get to the same answer. But if you then look at the long math of how they got to the answer, it's so different, and you can learn so much and get so many insights. There's such immense value. The studies show a team that comes from diverse backgrounds are 95% more agile problem solvers. And maybe that's not DEI, that's using this one, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I'm super excited for the expansion and the things that we have coming up. It's been the whole business background it's a process, but we're getting there.
Yeah. Well, we've got faith in you. We trust you. You're going to build something beautiful, and it's going to be a great resource for our community that we really need.
Thank you, Cody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So let's talk through some common misconceptions in the queer community about mental health and getting mental health help. What do you see as the ones that jump out right at first for you?
The misconceptions about mental health. Let me think on this. Well, certainly I can't fix you.
Yeah. Right. It's not.
I don't have a magic wand or any kind of special powers that, I'm here to kind of be like your ally, your support, your coach for better or worse, to help.
Also, it's important to note you're not broken. Right.
Most importantly, yes, because I can't fix you because you're not broken.
You're not broken.
For pointing that out. Yes, absolutely. But that I'm here to support changes that you want to make in your life and identifying healthy supports and identifying healthy coping mechanisms and things like that. And so, so maybe the misconception would be that there is some cure to a problem that does not exist. So
I can tell you what was powerful for me was having someone that's not in my inner circle be able to give me unbiased advice about my problems that I was having in my life. Right.
Yeah. One of my favorite way of putting that, is to say that, the counseling relationship is so special because it's all about you the whole time. Like I might self-disclose, I might share some things about me or whatever the case may be, but it's not up to you to hold that space for me. I'm sharing it to be relatable, but not for you to try to fix what's going on with me, right? So the counseling relationship is so different because no other relationship that you have in your life is only one-sided besides the counseling relationship. Everybody else, your mom, your dad, your best friend, your partner, whomever that is, they're going to want something from you. And it's a give and take. The counseling relationship is all one way. It's all about you the whole time. So that's what I kind of do to differentiate the counseling relationship from, any other relationship.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I also would say, one of the big misconceptions I think in the queer community and kind of in the young community these days is this reliance on self-medication. That one's really tricky. Yes, I'm struggling, but if I have a drink tonight, I'll probably be all right, or I'm struggling, but I'm not depressed because I'm smoking marijuana, right? That's diagnosing yourself is medicating yourself is one thing. Self-diagnosis is tricky. You really cannot diagnose a mental health issue without a professional.
Absolutely.
And I think it's something that we do as a community, something that I've caught myself doing too, is when I see someone struggling, in my mind, I'm like, oh, they have this. It's not appropriate, right? It's never it's just not. It leads you down a path of thinking about someone or yourself that just maybe is all projection from you, right?
Well, yeah, it's pathologizing. And, a large portion of the people that I see, they come in and they're like, oh, I have this or I have that. And it's like, I get to be the one that says, no, you are a human being experiencing emotions that are sometimes uncomfortable, but no, you are not A, B, or C. And so for some people, that's really relieving, but they're very convinced that they have something wrong with them. And I'm like, that's not this.
Something else that we see a lot is then people, when they do get a diagnosis, rather than choosing to work on the diagnosis, is using that now as an excuse for everything that's wrong in their life.
Yeah,
right?
we call that learned helplessness. And so, yes, there's that aspect is a really important piece, and why it's crucial to work with a mental health professional as well is that, your over reliance on that diagnosis can then very easily become your identity or who you are, which then holds you back. And it's actually much more difficult to treat somebody for what they identify as, right? Like, I identify as I am a depressed person versus I am a person with depression is much more difficult to treat, because that is who they see themselves as, right? And so that's going to affect your prognosis if you are identifying as, well, I have anxiety, so then therefore I can't go out and do the things, right? So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I tend to use the phrasing like I struggle with X or I battle X. I mean, because it is a struggle. It's something that I'm always going to have to. I people probably know this about me, but I have ADHD, and
Mhm.
that it took me a really, really, really long time to get to that diagnosis because we were treating my symptoms and not the underlying cause of what was making me so stressed out and depressed, which was my inability to organize my thoughts and all that kind of business, right? That's a long way to say, like, now I know that the thing I have to do and I'm going to have to do for the rest of my life is learn how to categorize and mentally prepare myself for things, and how I organize my work, and how I ask for grace in the fact that I work and learn differently than others, right?
Mhm.
Which has actually made me a pretty powerful advocate for mental health in the workplace, because there's just, if you tell me, here is the work you have to do today, and here's the way you need to accomplish it, my mind has already, before you finish that sentence, picked 100 holes of how I could make it work better.
Yeah.
And so I cannot concentrate unless I implement those.
Absolutely. Yes. And you mentioned ADHD, that there's a neurological component to that. It's not just like something that, you've chosen or something to that effect. Like, you have to learn how to cope with that, but there are neurological reasons for that, because there's the differences in how your brain has developed. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yep. 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 And, when I had a mental health professional explain to me what is happening with synapses in my brain when I'm going through depression, it helped me immensely understand this is something it is part of health. It's part of my body, right? It's not some abstract thing that lives in the abstract of my thoughts. It actually is the physical parts of my brain, Um,
100%.
yeah,
Yes, absolutely.
that helped me a lot. So,
Good. I'm so glad.
so what unique mental health challenges do we face in the LGBTQ plus community? And for those challenges, how can someone who's an ally better support us?
Thank you for that question. I actually did some preparation for our podcast today. And so I want to get a shout out to a training that I recently took. It is called Autism LGBTQIA Plus in the Intersectionality of Gender and Sexuality, which was given by Wynn Lawson, who is a PhD. And he was a trans person living in Australia with autism, as do all of his family members. So I got this really great content to share with you guys today, based off of that training that I took. And so to answer some of your questions about the LGBTQIA plus population, it is co-occurring ADHD. Wait, hold on, let me start over. ADHD co-occurs in 75% of the autistic population. Let's see, there is the Trevor study said that 5% of LGBTQ people have autism. There's another study from Nature Communication that says 24% of gender diverse people have autism. And currently in the United States, 1 in 36 people have autism, according to the CDC. Boys are more likely to be diagnosed with autism 4-1 versus girls, but they think that has a lot to do with the fact that females are better at masking. That number, the 1 in 36, has increased by 241% from the year 2000, and then 40% live with suicidality. And so hearing those numbers in terms of how much it's co-occurring in the LGBTQIA plus population, that's an important thing to know, is that there's a lot of overlap. I also want to highlight that gender dysphoria is more likely to impact autistic individuals. 40% of trans individuals living with gender dysphoria attempt suicide. So these are some of the statistics that I found from taking this training and that I wanted to share with some of you about and highlight the importance of having the proper mental health care, how this impacts the LGBTQIA plus community in higher numbers, or that there is a co-occurring prevalence of these things, and how it can impact things like suicidality and mental health. There was also some other really cool things that I learned from this training. So intersectionality highlights powerlessness, pathology, and other problems that can lead to despair. There's this theory, and so don't come for me. It's a theory, but it was one that I thought was super interesting when I heard this. I had to like listen to it again and take notes so that I could share this with you guys. So let me know what you think. Okay. So there is a theory that a baby in utero develops their physiological sex organs around 8 weeks old. And when that is when they receive a hormonal wash that is triggered by DNA that forms male sex organs, since we are all female until this occurs. Okay. Here's where it gets interesting. At 14 weeks, there's another wash or release of hormones that triggers the development of the neurological system, such as the brain, nerves, backbone, or etc. This is also when gender is formed. So sometimes those hormones don't agree, such as when a female sex baby or embryo, is given more testosterone, and then people with autism oftentimes have higher level of testosterone as well. So that kind of can explain the differences there. So then if they've got the higher testosterone, but a female body with male gender identity or vice versa can result in non-binary identity. So there's also a documentary by Michael Mosley called What's Becoming a Person. And so I thought that was really interesting information to share with you guys based off of the training that I took. So I will remind you that it is just a theory. They don't have any proof of this, but I thought that how interesting where, you know, we can have maybe a biological explanation for why there are differences. And that also we know that non-binary, intersex, these things happen in nature, and that it's not just, you know, one or the other in nature. Why would that be true for human beings?
Right. Yeah, that's very, very true. And that's not even to mention the existence of intersex people. And, you know, those that are born with just an X chromosome, that also exists. There's
or
also
XXY, which is Klinefelters, like those kinds of things that, like, we don't test people's chromosomes when they come out of the womb, like that.
Right.
But these are very real differences that happen and occur in nature.
Yeah. It's very interesting. That's very interesting, that study. I don't know if it came up in your training or you have a personal opinion on the matter, but you mentioned that a lot of these numbers have been on the rise since the year 2000. What would you attribute that to?
The history of autism, and you know, I don't have all of the facts in front of me. I've been trying to take some trainings on this, and so, you know, mental health field It is always in development, right? It is a science. And
Right.
so, like, the things that we used to think in the 1900s do not necessarily apply to today. So, like, with some of the history with autism, I don't remember the year offhand, but that we used to consider people with autism as schizophrenic, and that they had schizophrenic, and that was relatively recently.
Mm.
And so it's really been like since the 1980s that we've put more of a focus on the neurodevelopmental disorders such as autism and ADHD. And so we didn't have a really good way of identifying or separating, like we knew something, but what was it? And we called it different things and that kind of stuff. And so, like, through the evolution of research and studies and having a more compassionate approach, destigmatization, those kinds of things has helped us come to understand people in different ways. And like, hopefully that's going to continue. But that the mental health field has not always gotten it right. So we need to be
Right.
honest about that.
Yeah, it's true. And I think, it's important to note too that people always say like everybody's got ADHD now. People have had ADHD for a really long time. We're better about diagnosing it now, right? It's like
Mhm.
it's saying there's more gay and trans people than ever before. Also, not true. More people are comfortable coming out these days, right? It's
Yes.
the same thing as with autism stuff. They may have been misdiagnosed earlier. They may not have accepted their diagnosis. They may
Mhm.
not wish to disclose, and now we're seeing more acceptance behind those things. So we're seeing numbers rise. It's not that suddenly there's some factor in the United States of America that's making 30% more of our kids autistic. It's not true, right?
Mhm.
It's just
Mhm.
a factor of now we're more accepting and understanding of what an autism diagnosis means, right?
Yeah. And hopefully through the research and, more of an emphasis on these things, we can find some of the underlying causes or treatments and things like that, that it will get better at that. And what I often compare it to is that, back in the day, if you had cancer, you were like shipped off. Like, it was not discussed. It was there was something wrong with you, that this was very, very highly stigmatized. And it has been through the research in, understanding of what cancer is, that we have a much better appreciation and that we can include people with cancer in our society. And so, mental health, again, has not gotten the funding or the backing that some of our physical ailments have. But let's remember that a lot of our physical ailments have also had the stigmatization around them, and look what it's taken for us to get further along with that. So we need to continue pushing the importance of mental health research, development. We're not always going to get it right, but we need to do a better job of that. And we do that through science, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it struck me that you mentioned that these things were on the rise since 2020, and we opened the episode with mentioning how awareness around mental health has increased since the pandemic,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is what's the magic number? 2020, right?
Oh, I just hit my, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, there's something to be said as well about scientific research being done about gender and sexuality. That stuff was people have been studying that for a really, really long time. It typically was always self-funded by a very passionate researcher, I cannot remember the gentleman's name, Magnus something in Germany in the early on in the 1900s, right? Germany was actually on the forefront of sexuality research until Hitler rose to power, right? And then that sort of stuff was just kind of pushed under, but not pushed under, but those people were killed.
Erased. Yes.
um, yeah, so it's something we've been learning about for a really long time, but something that now is getting more research because people are recognizing the essentiality of that kind of work to really impact people's life if we understand better.
Well, and it's interesting, like, if you look at insurance as a model, they separate your eyes and teeth. Like, how does that work? And so they've done that with mental health for so long too, that, like, that there is a whole person, the whole person. There's a nervous system. There are, all of these different things that we separate out from when we're not treating the whole person, and that there are neurological conditions that come with this, the physical attributes that come with this. These things are not separate from, it's one whole person, So I kind of see it in those terms too of, we've tried to like separate these things out as though they're not connected, and they're absolutely connected. Like if your mental health is suffering, of course your physical health. But if you just go to the doctor and you get a pill and you're like, oh, okay, but
Yeah.
I could go on for days with the soapbox with that. It's a wild world we live in with that.
It is a wild, wild world. That's true. So I want to ask, what are some signs that someone might be struggling with their mental health, and what steps can someone that's a loved one take when they see that happening?
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you asked that. It's not the same for everyone, and so there's no like blanket statement that this is a one size fits all kind of thing. But check on your strong friends. I think sometimes the people that are able to mask or to be high functioning or things like that, that sometimes we take for granted that they're doing okay, and that's not always the case. So check on your strong friends too. But obviously, if you're seeing some of the warning signs, social withdrawal or isolation, irritability, that's a big one, especially in men. Let's talk about that for a second, because like with women, it's more socially acceptable to be emotional or sad. A lot of times depression in men shows up as being mad, and that's more culturally or socially acceptable for men to present with anger. So that's something to be mindful of and watch for. So irritability, reactivity, changes in their sleeping or eating pattern, drastic changes in their weight. It's not always a great one to bring up with people, but you see it. So make sure you have that rapport. But changes in their weight without any, like they're actually trying to do something, changes in their hygiene. These are all things that, you might see and they're more physically present, or that you might be able to like pick up on. But like I said, there are plenty of people that struggle that are high functioning and perfectionists, and they go to work every day and they're able to mask. And so, sometimes just having a regular check-in with somebody can make the difference. You just never really know what people are struggling with. So
that's fantastic advice, and I hope that everybody takes it to heart. But check on your strong friends, check on your friends, talk to your people, make sure they're okay. That's something that I always tell people is that mental health is not a taboo subject to talk about with your trusted friends. It's not, right? So,
and they can always correct you. I mean, yeah, you can say, hey, I'm worried about you. Are you okay? Like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, I'm fine. It was just a thing, But if they are struggling, that might really make the difference, is that somebody noticed and somebody cared.
Yeah, it reminds me of the way that I coach people on how to talk to folks with different pronouns, right? People are afraid to even go there because what if I get it wrong? What I'm telling you is, if you love your friend enough to make the effort, they will notice. And they're not, that's right. That I personally have a friend in my life who's non-binary. The first time I've had a close person like that in my life, that was that close that I would have to actively put the stuff that I teach into practice. And I slip up probably weekly, right? Still, after months of knowing them. And there is some grace allowed because they know I'm coming from a place of love and I am trying.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes
sense. It's not something to be afraid of to get it wrong. And that's the same sort of business when you're talking to somebody about their mental health or your mental health, right?
Oh, there was another one I just thought of that I definitely want to highlight or mention, is substance use. Substance use is a pretty good indicator. So watch out. Watch for that one too.
Can you share any specific strategies or tools that you found effective for fostering resilience and well-being with queer clients?
Okay, let me think about that one. Techniques.
that's probably not a one size fits all.
My inclination is to be like, it's not different than anybody else, right? Like my inclination is to say, emotional regulation, distress tolerance, mindfulness practices, these kinds of things are the ways in which I would treat probably almost anybody, like I often say that about people with autism, like there's no medication. And so, it's really to reduce your suffering and the things that it is that you're struggling with. And so I, as a counselor, I don't prescribe medicine. So these are my tools that I use to work with people of, all differing backgrounds. I don't know that it would be much different in that way because I'm teaching coping skills, emotional regulation, distress tolerance, mindfulness practices, these kinds of things. Like that's what I would say to probably anyone to help build resilience around that. Interpersonal resolutions, these kinds of things are all the things that I'm going to be working on with a person. So sorry, I don't have anything specific.
That's okay. It's perfectly all right. What advice would you give to someone watching who wants to support LGBTQ plus mental health or improve their own mental health?
Reach out to Danville Pride.
Hey,
Shout out.
it really does go a long way to have a supportive community of friends that you can trust.
Yeah. Get connected. Connection is key. Connection, feeling disconnected, is the heart of depression, is the heart of mental illness, right? So like whether or not you choose to utilize a professional such as myself or somebody in the community that can act as a peer support or, just be there for you and make you feel like you're at home with other people that represent a part of the community that you feel a part of, like that in and of itself is healing. So, I think that there's something to be said about all of that is like, get connected, find your tribe.
That's it. Oh my God. If there were 3 words that I've probably said more in the past 3 years than any other, it's find your tribe. That really is it. You really do have to find your people.
Yay.
That's that, I never knew doing the work that I do in DEI would translate so well into helping people find their tribes in my own communities. Putting this stuff into practice in my real life and it not just being abstract people out in the work world. I work virtually, so I see the people that I work with maybe a couple times a year, but being able to do it with my people has been so impactful for me, and it's been such a great outlet to help me feel like I'm doing some good in the world, right? And I think everybody has the capability to tap into that.
Well, and if you're out there doing the work or getting connected, people do that in a number of ways, whether that be, funding or donations, or like maybe they don't really feel the need or aren't ready to be seen or out in the community. And so, they prefer to do it through donations or, showing up for events or, hosting events. That's always a good one. That kind of stuff, putting up a table at an event or just being out in the community in that regard, that can be very impactful. So,
and hey, if you're local and you want to get more involved, we have availability for you to use your superpower for the good of the community. If you come to me with an idea that you want to execute, I will help you.
yes.
That's yeah. Because I think it's healthy for everybody. It's healthy for you, even if one person is impacted, it's worth it. We're not a gigantic community. So
Yes, absolutely. People do that through social media. Like there's any number of ways that like fits with your comfort level and your willingness to get involved, but like having that representation, having that connection, that kind of stuff, like that's really impactful for yourself and for other people.
That's fantastic. So I want to close. We didn't do this on the first episode because I didn't have a guest, but the question I'm going to ask everybody at the end of these things, and it's a tough one, it's a big one, is, in your opinion, from your lens of your experience, what does the LGBTQ plus community need the most?
I'm so glad you asked that question, and I was ready for it. So I don't know how you're going to feel about this, but I'm going to say it. So I as someone that does not identify as being in the community, I am very mindful about saying, like, trying to express what I think they need. But what I want to say they deserve is that they deserve respect and compassion, understanding, time, the ability to process what they're feeling, and they deserve a strong community of like-minded people. So I was ready for you, Cody.
That's, I'm going to answer this question just the one time. And it's part of the reason that I put you first, Mickensy. Beyond just being, we needed to speak most eminently about mental health. It's also what I think the LGBTQ plus community needs the most is active allies. People who have found the space in their life to speak up for us when we're not in the room. And people who have found a way, as Mickensy has illustrated in her business, to serve a community that is not her own because she sees the value that we bring, right, as human beings on the planet. Active allies.
Thank you.
And I thought it would never be a better time for me to express that that's what I think our community needs the most than to have someone that's an example of that on, you know what I mean? So that's my fault.
It's beautiful. Thank you, friend.
Thank you for being with us. I just want to say, this has been really, really, really lovely. And please stay tuned for next week's episode, or next month's episode, I should say. We're going to talk about, and Mickensy talked about it a little bit, I talk about it all the time. We're talking about intersectionality in the LGBTQ plus community in our next episode. And if you don't know what that is and want to learn more, and you've heard the buzzword and you're like, how does that apply to me? We're going to show you in Technicolor in March. So stay tuned to this channel. Give us a like, follow, subscribe. We're on Facebook. We're building a new website that's going to be launched soon. We're going to come over to Blue Sky soon. We've got the YouTube channel. We're coming at you full force. Thank you again, Mickensy, for being here, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in. If you haven't already, please check out Danville Pride on Facebook and give us a follow to stay up to date on our latest events and announcements. We'll see you next time.